Anime is no stranger to tortured characters who have the most profound impact on the audience. While most popular anime such as Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Demon Slayer have protagonists who continue to be upbeat and happy-go-lucky despite sorrows in their life, things change when the stories get darker. Works such as Hajime Isamaya's Attack on Titan, Sugumi Oba's Death, Kento Miura's Berserk, and Ishida Sui's Tokyo Ghoul are renowned for their depictions of tortured and tragic protagonists who are victims of the world as well as their mindset. As a result, they turn the tables and take actions that not only inflict pain on others, but also increase their personal pain. They self-sabotage, sometimes for the greater good, and sometimes for their own downfall. Tokyo Ghoul's protagonist, Ken Kaneki, is easily one of the most renowned protagonists in anime, and the complexity of his character arc is the driving force behind this. Not only is he a victim of his circumstances, but he makes it worse for himself. The more he ascends the ladder in this new world of the ghoul, greater the descent he experiences with respect to his mental sanity. He is equally a character driven by the plot, and a character who drives the plot. As such, we are dedicating today's video to him. He's a dreamy kid who loves reading books, but little does he know his life is about to become a horror story itself. Kaneki's Introduction to Tokyo Ghoul. As you may expect from the protagonist of a manga, Ken Kaneki is an orphan. He lost his father when he was only 4 years old. As he grew up, he barely remembered how his father looked. Hoping to feel closer to him, Kaneki found solace in reading the books that his father had left behind, for he used to be an avid reader. Gradually, Kaneki himself acquired the taste for literature. Kaneki's other source of happiness was the hamburgers his mother used to make for him. His mother lived long enough for Kaneki to remember her well after her death. Following the passing of his father, a heavy burden fell on his mother's shoulders, as she had to provide for her family. And although she struggled with doing so, her sister made matters worse as she began to hound Kaneki's mother for cash. Because her sister was financially in a tougher spot, Kaneki's mother worked several jobs throughout the day to provide for everyone. As a woman, Kaneki's mother was altruistic. She believed that Kaneki should grow up to be a person who would rather get hurt than be the one hurting others. This was darkly ironic because she would take out her frustration on Kaneki, beating him and abusing him. Kaneki would cry and laugh, apologizing to his mother. However, despite being a terrible mother in a way, she never showed any resentment towards her sister, who was the root cause of their problems. Eventually, she overworked herself to death, leaving Kaneki orphaned and all alone at the tender age of 10. After she passed, Kaneki consoled himself by creating a rosy image of his mother in his head, presenting her as a lovely mother to himself. He was soon adopted by his aunt's family, where he was initially treated well. He was praised for his good grades, but the praise soon turned into resentment, as Kaneki was academically brighter than his aunt's son. She would take out her anger on Kaneki, just like his mother used to do. Home-cooked meals turned into money that was left on the table for Kaneki to fetch food for himself. The repercussions of such a horrific life made Kaneki reserved as a person. He had no friends in school and was bullied until he was approached by Hide, who became his best friend. Naturally, Hide became someone who was very important to Kaneki as he helped him with his loneliness throughout his sorrows. But this also meant that Kaneki's heart was too gentle for him to deal with the pain of loss again, which went on to play a great role in the future when Kaneki was willing to go through extreme lengths for his friends. While Hide was more outgoing, Kaneki continued to be more introverted as a dreamy boy who often stayed lost in his books. He loved the literary works of Sen Takatsuki and even had a taste for learning language. Unfortunately, the misery of his childhood was only the trailer for the misery that would soon befall him. He is the Gregor Samsa of his own tragedy, only his tale is far bloodier. Kaneki's struggle with accepting his ghoul side. Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis portrayed the transformation of Gregor Samsa from a traveling salesman to an insect. What began with him denying his new form gradually turned into him finding solace in living like an insect. In fact, he lost his humanity the moment he realized that he couldn't eat human food anymore, leaving him with no choice but to step into the grotesque life of being an insect. Ishida Sui's Ken Kaneki goes through something similar, and evidently so, since the mangaka took heavy inspiration from Gregor Samsa's character while curating Kaneki's character arc. Because of Kaneki's sorrowful childhood, he had grown up to be gentle and reserved, definitely not the type to approach a woman of his liking. His story begins with him hanging out with Hide at a coffee shop named Onteku. The two of them offhandedly listen to the latest news about growing ghoul attacks in their ward, which is the 20th ward. However, Hide is more curious about a different piece of news. His bookworm best friend has developed a crush on a girl. While Hide pesters Kaneki to tell him who she is, the girl walks into the coffee shop, flustering Kaneki as he begins to blush. He even notices how she is reading the same book he is, Sen Takatsuki's Egg of the Black Goat. The novel is about a boy whose mother is a cold-blooded serial killer who is known as the Black Goat. He despises his mother for this, but eventually has to acknowledge similar desires growing within him. What is interesting here is not the plot of the book itself, but how it ties into the upcoming dynamic between Rize and Kaneki. Hide leaves the cafe, hoping to give Kaneki and Rize some alone time. As she walks past him, they notice how they both have the same book. Soon, they start conversing about Sen Takatsuki. One thing leads to another, and Kaneki winds up with a bookstore date with the woman named Rize Kamishiro. The date goes well, and the two of them begin to bond. On their way back home, Kaneki asks to see Rize again, and she asks her to drop her home because she lives close to the place that has become notorious for ghoul attacks. As the two go into a dingy alley, Rize hugs Kaneki and bites his shoulder, proving herself to be the ghoul. In fact, she was the ghoul whose attacks and killings were all over the news. Rize's Kagune, that is her biological weapon as a ghoul, pierces Kaneki's abdomen, incapacitating him. However, before she can kill him, steel beams fall on her from above and crush her to death. Kaneki is rushed to the Kano General Hospital, where Dr. Kano transplants Rize's organs into his abdomen to save his life. The operation is a success, but to the viewers and the readers, when Kaneki opens his eyes, one of them boasts the Kagugan, or the Eye of the Ghoul. Of course, Kaneki doesn't know that he is now, at least partially, a ghoul. In the hospital, Kaneki seemingly hates the food he is being given. He considers it to be an effect of his accident and hopes to get better when he goes home. However, nothing changes once he does. Food tastes slimy and petrol-like, making him gag out normal food no matter how tasty he used to find it prior to the accident. Right at that moment, he watches the news, where a reporter talks about how ghouls cannot eat human food because it tastes disgusting to them. As Kaneki continued to live on water, he became famished. He rushes to the streets, but when he's around humans, he begins to salivate profusely. Soon he learns that the waitress from Anteku, Toka Kirishima, was a ghoul as well. Kaneki gets back home and realizes that the organ transplant was the root cause of his transformation. As such, he tries to stab himself in the abdomen with a knife, only for the knife to break apart. Desperate, he turns to Toka for her help. She takes him to Yoshimura, the manager of Anteku. Kaneki is offered human meat to satisfy his hunger, but he is repelled by the idea. What made him different was the fact that ghouls were generally born as ghouls. Being half human and half ghoul was unheard of, making Kaneki averse to eating meat, unlike the other ghouls. Fortunately, he learns that he can still enjoy coffee. He is later attacked by a ghoul named Nishio, but Toka arrives right on time to get rid of Nishio. It's revealed that each ghoul has their own feeding ground up until a stronger ghoul defeats them to take over. Because Rize was stronger than most ghouls because of her ridiculously powerful Kagune, she had taken over Nishio's feeding grounds. In fact, Rize was notorious amongst humans and ghouls for her excessive eating, giving her the title of the Binge Eater. Later, Kaneki visits a senior from his university with Hide, who just turns out to be Nishio. Of course, Hide doesn't know that his best friend and his senior are ghouls, and gets lured by Nishio into his feeding ground. Hide gets knocked out, and Kaneki is no match for Nishio in the ensuing fight because the latter wields his Kagune. But as Nishio tries to kill Hide, a desperate Kaneki releases his Kagune, or rather, Rize's super powerful Kagune, which totally dominates the fight and injures Nishio. In his unleashed ghoul form and his pangs of tremendous hunger due to not eating, Kaneki almost eats Hide, until he is stopped by Toka. He is then taken to Anteku, where an unconscious Kaneki is fed human meat to satisfy his hunger. When he learns of it from the taste of blood in his mouth, he is appalled. However, the manager Yoshimura tells him that a ghoul's hunger had to be satisfied, and that he wasn't just a human anymore. He belonged to both worlds. As such, Yoshimura offers to teach Kaneki how to live as a ghoul while keeping his place as a human. Kaneki begins to work as a part-time worker in Anteku, with Toka as his co-worker. Hide is made to believe that he got injured in a car accident, while Yoshimura begins to teach Kaneki how to eat human food while being a ghoul, so that he can keep his cover and go out with his friends. He also encounters a mother and daughter duo, Ryoku and Hinami Fuguchi, who don't hunt like other ghouls, and instead buy human meat from Anteku. Here, Kaneki learns how it is not uncommon for some ghouls to choose this route, and he also notices how family dynamics within ghouls are similar to that of humans. In a way, it humanizes ghouls in the eyes of Kaneki. Unfortunately, ghoul investigators from the Commission of Counter Ghoul, or the CCG, catch wind of the Fuguchi's existence and begin to look for them. Toka takes Kaneki to Uda's High-Sai art mask studio, where he gets his famous face masks and since ghouls need to conceal their identities. He also meets Yomo, and they go to find food supplies together. Instead of killing people, Yomo looks for people who have committed suicide, making Kaneki aware of other ways in which ghouls procure their food without killing people. Kaneki later bumps into Hinami once again at Anteku, where he teaches her how to read some kanji while he sees her reading some of Sen Takatsuki's works. She thanks Kaneki before leaving with her mother, but the Fuguchis are soon cornered by the ghoul investigators. Ryoko convinces Hinami to escape while she fights the investigators. Hinami rushes to Kaneki for help, but when they reach the scene, they see how Ryoko has already been killed by a ruthless investigator named Kiryo Mado. Following this, Kaneki begins to blame himself for the death because he is too weak, and he notices how Hinami has been orphaned. To get revenge, Toka attacks the ghoul investigators and kills one of them while wearing her bunny mask. She becomes a highly wanted ghoul within the CCG for killing an investigator, and Kaneki tells her how he feels that she is wrong. Although he believes that it's necessary for the ghoul investigators to exist, he also explains how he would have mourned if she were to die. This also shows us how Kaneki is now struggling with having his feet in two separate boats, much like Gregor Samsa, who despised his new insect form while finding solace in partaking in more insect-like activities. Kaneki asks Toka to teach him how to fight, and she threatens his life to send him into fight-or-flight mode, resulting in Kaneki unleashing his Kagune once again. Later, they dress up as school students to go to the CCG branch in the 20th Ward, hoping to pass misinformation about Hinami's whereabouts. However, Mado notices them and suspects that they are ghouls. Kaneki is forced to pass by the RC scan gate by Mado, which is a gate that can detect ghouls by scanning the number of RC cells in the body. These RC cells were the biggest biological giveaways for ghouls, since they had them in egregious amounts. Being half-human, Kaneki is able to pass through the RC scan gate. The orphaned Hinami runs away from Anteku, leaving Kaneki and Toka to go search for her. They split up, and Toka finds Hinami, but Kaneki overhears Mado's phone conversation with another investigator named Kotaro Amon, and heads to intercept him, hoping to buy Toka and Hinami enough time to flee. Donning his mask, Kaneki tries to fight Amon, only for the latter to overpower him with ease. Amon then begins to talk about the death of the investigator killed by Toka and brings up children who have been orphaned because of ghoul activities. Amon presents ghouls in a demonic and sinister light, and rightfully so, because for humans, ghouls are the bane of their existence. However, Kaneki has now seen both sides, and although he acknowledges what Amon just said, he also realizes that he is the only one who knows there are two sides to this story. The two engage in a fight once again, which ends with Kaneki's victory because he uses his Kagune. However, with his ghoul instincts unleashed, Kaneki begins to lose control of his impulses once again. He begins to cry and begs Amon to leave before Kaneki kills him, as he does not want to be a killer. This surprises Amon, considering he has never met a ghoul like Kaneki. Naturally, this leads to Amon growing even more curious about him. Meanwhile, Mado is killed by Toka, and Kaneki goes to Kano General Hospital for his checkup. He asks Dr. Kano about his body under the assumption that the doctor is aware of his situation, but the doctor seems to be oblivious to everything. That day, Kaneki also finds out that Hide has taken a new interest in cracking ghoul cases, and he strongly objects to Hide doing so. He eventually comes across an annoying ghoul named Tsukiyama, or Gourmet. Passionate about food, or in this case human meat, Gourmet grows curious after smelling Kaneki. Later, Kaneki meets with Uda and his friend Itori, where he learns about the existence of other one-eyed ghouls, or hybrids. He also finds out about Rize's death likely being set up by someone, but Itori agrees to disclose more information only if Kaneki finds information about Tsukiyama's ghoul restaurant for her. He goes on to meet Gourmet after a few days. They play squash, and he accidentally cuts Kaneki's finger. Following that, Gourmet soaks up the blood with his handkerchief and secretly smells it in the washroom, hoping to taste Kaneki soon. He goes on to invite Kaneki to his restaurant, but it is soon revealed that Kaneki is going to be presented as a dinner menu alongside two other ghouls. Here, it is also revealed that several ghouls are interested in cannibalism, making it perfectly normal for them to not only eat a human ghoul hybrid, but also a complete ghoul. However, Tsukiyama changes his mind and decides to be the only person to eat Kaneki, taking him off the menu for the other ghouls, especially after he realizes that Kaneki is one of the rare one-eyed ghouls. Kaneki returned to Anteku, but Tsukiyama soon kidnapped Nishio's girlfriend Kimi to trap Kaneki. Together, Kaneki and Nishio decide to save Kimi, but they were both quickly defeated by the Gourmet. Soon, Toka joins the fight, but they are eventually incapacitated due to their lack of strength. In the end, Kaneki lets Toka eat a small part of him, allowing her to regain her strength. Ultimately, Toka was able to defeat the Gourmet, but this was far from being the end of problems for Kaneki, as the worst was yet to come. He is a ghoul. The disturbing mental breakdown of Ken Kaneki. The story introduces us to the organization known as the Aogiri Tree. This terrorist organization was notorious among the CCG and ghouls alike, and was rumored to be ruled by the One-Eyed King. Some of its leaders had ordered ghouls from Rize's old ward, which is the 11th ward, to search for her in Anteku. This results in Kaneki meeting Banjo, a ghoul who is quick to notice how the former smells like Rize. Because he is enamored by the Binge Eater, Banjo attacks Kaneki thinking he is her boyfriend. However, Kaneki denies the claim and tells him that Rize has relocated. Soon after, Anteku gets raided by a man named Yamori, Toka's brother Ayato, and a clown-like ghoul named Nico. They had been ordered to either capture Rize or the one who had her smell, putting Kaneki in the eye of the hurricane. He was eventually captured. At the base of Aogiri Tree's operations, Kaneki's abdomen is pierced to make him reveal his Kakugan. He is also made aware of Dr. Kano being the man behind Kaneki's transformation, as the organ he received from Rize was not her kidney, but her kakuho, a sac-like organ present in ghouls that holds the RC cells and is the heart of the Kagune. With Banjo, Kaneki and the other captives make a plan to escape, but their plans are soon foiled by Aogiri, leading to Kaneki getting captured as Yamori seems to have a special interest in it. Yamori takes Kaneki to his hobby room, where the one-eyed ghoul is met with a dead person sitting on a chair. Beneath his chair sits a bucket full of his own fingertips. Yamori had tortured the ghoul for making a mistake, and it is now Kaneki's turn to go through the same. He takes out RC suppressants, which can make a ghoul as vulnerable to attacks as a human. Yamori injects it into Kaneki by piercing his left eye, as that is the only place of the ghoul body that a syringe can pierce through. Yamori tells a weakened Kaneki that Kano used Rize's kakuho on him because her kagune was so special. He brings his pliers and starts to do the same thing to Kaneki as he had done to the guy before him. Yamori takes off his fingers and toes, while the RC suppressant makes Kaneki feel all of the pain one would feel if they were a human in this situation. To make it worse, Yamori makes Kaneki count down from 1,000 by sevens in order to keep him conscious. With time, Kaneki regenerates and begins to regain his strength, only for Yamori to repeat the same thing all over again. And he doesn't do it for any particular reason except for the personal amusement of torturing someone, which made it worse for Kaneki. Yamori himself had gone through something similar before, only for him to turn the torture on his oppressor and develop a taste for it. During this time, the kind Kaneki, who wished to avoid violence at all times, begins to feel a growing urge to kill his torturer. To ramp up the torture, Yamori takes out a 20-centimeter long red Chinese centipede. He puts it inside Kaneki's left ear as the both of them begin to laugh like lunatics. At this point, the torture takes itself to new lengths, and Kaneki desperately wishes to die. However, something, or rather someone, keeps him going. Rize appears in Kaneki's subconscious mind, and the two of them take a trip down memory lane, where Kaneki narrates the story of his childhood to Rize, conveniently leaves out the parts where his mother had abused him, portraying her in a gentle light as someone who always encouraged Kaneki to be the one who was hurt instead of being the one who hurt others. Rize quite obviously disagrees with this philosophy, as she finds it to be quite pathetic. While he tells her about his life following his mother's death when he was treated terribly by his aunt, Rize tries to make him acknowledge the resentment within it. In the physical world, Yamori returns with a mother-daughter duo who Kaneki had previously tried to save. Because Kaneki's extraordinary physical attributes keep him physically alive and capable, Yamori decides to mess with his mind. As a result, he asks Kaneki to choose between saving the mother or the child. The mother ghoul begs him to save the child, but Kaneki cannot bring himself to pick one. If he lets the mother die, he'll create another orphan, much like himself and Hinami. If he lets the child die, he'll cause the death of a child in front of her mother. Unfortunately, Yamori kills them both in front of Kaneki and leaves. Already disturbed beyond belief, Kaneki is very vulnerable right now, and his mind mimics the story of the egg of the black goat, where the son had begun to experience the same feelings of being a killer like his mother had. Rize blames Kaneki for being too weak to protect the mother and her child, too weak to protect himself from not being tricked by Rize on the day of the date, too weak to stand against the torture because he is seemingly relying on a fragment of his imagination for solace, and of course, too weak to save his friends at Anteku. In fact, it has always been his weakness that caused his life to be horrible. Instead, if Kaneki could kill Yamori, he could have saved the ones he killed. Similarly, if his mother had refused to help her sister out, she would have been alive, and Kaneki would not be an orphan. She was weak, which led to her not being able to take a stand for her own son, and in the end, she lost everyone. This triggers something in Kaneki, as he finally lets his resentment out, claiming that he wanted his mother to choose him and live for him, even if it was at the cost of his aunt dying. However, Kaneki finally is a part of a community he can call a family now. He has people he can rely on, and people he wants to be reliable for. And the one thing that can take this away from him right now is the Aogiri tree. Having lived a lonely life before, Kaneki does not want to let go of this newfound peace, but to fight the organization, he needs to wield the power of his extraordinary Kagune. Unfortunately, Kaneki lets go of his inhibitions and bites Rize as he finally chooses her way of living over his mother's altruistic one. Brimming with strength and hair whitened from torture, Kaneki begins to rip his skin apart while digging into his face in this climactic moment, as he finally acknowledges himself as a ghoul when he says the words, "I am a ghoul." So when Yamori comes back, Kaneki gives him a taste of his own medicine, as Yamori had done with his own oppressor before. Kaneki manages to attack Yamori, making the latter unleash his Kagune. However, Kaneki begins to eat the Kagune, cannibalizing on Yamori to grow stronger. This is where Kaneki is seemingly out of his cocoon phase, and this is the very moment that changed the course of Kaneki's life and the story of Tokyo Ghoul. Meanwhile, the CCG was after the Aogiri tree, waiting for a showdown moment. Although Kaneki does not kill Yamori, he lets him know that his room will soon be found by the CCG, who will kill him. Considering how wounded and disarmed Yamori is because Kaneki has literally feasted on his weapon, he is going to be left with nothing to oppose the ghoul inspectors in battle. Outside the hobby room, Kaneki eventually runs into Ayato Kirishima, who was far stronger than Toka and had already bested her in battle. However, Kaneki ends up breaking 103 of Ayato's bones as revenge for Toka. He later regroups with his friends from Anteku and tells them that he will not go back and makes sure that Toka does not follow him. From here, Kaneki begins to carve out his own path as a ghoul who cannibalizes on other ghouls. And although ghouls taste like rotten fish, Kaneki knows that this is the best way for him to get stronger while not taking human lives. In a way, he goes on to become more dangerous and much more bloodthirsty than ghouls like Rize, and he only attains this mindset after he accepts the part of him that is Rize, which by extension refers to him accepting the part of him that is a ghoul. Although his "I am a ghoul" moment is pivotal in the manga, especially for its brutal and raw artwork that screams body horror, Studio Pierrot watered down the scene by an enormous extent due to censorship. It is not uncommon for extreme manga scenes depicting blood and other NSFW content to be altered for anime adaptations. However, the Tokyo Ghoul anime just portrayed an image of a calm Kaneki, whose hair suddenly turned white as he gently said, "I am a ghoul." Remember the scene in Goblet of Fire where Dumbledore charged at Harry Potter, aggressively asking him if he put his name in the Goblet of Fire? Meanwhile, the original novel had clearly mentioned how he had asked that question quite calmly. This contrast between the source and the adaptation went on to become a meme with Potterheads. Meanwhile, Tokyo Ghoul's "I am a ghoul" scene does the opposite, as it tones down what is supposed to be more brutal. And considering how extreme the scene is and how pivotal the moment originally should have been, this alteration is considered to be less of a meme and almost a blasphemy. After this point, the stories diverge. Tokyo Ghoul versus Tokyo Ghoul Route A. The anime adaptation for Tokyo Ghoul made all the news for the wrong reasons from the very beginning. Over 60 chapters had been adapted into 12 episodes. Several key moments were skipped, characters weren't developed well enough, and the pacing was too fast for a seinen. Considering how Studio Pierrot mostly adapts popular battle shonen like Naruto and Bleach, many fans of Ishida Sui's manga put all the blame on the studio for treating Tokyo Ghoul as just another action shonen anime that targets teenage boys. We have already spoken about how the torture scene was drastically mellower in the anime compared to its manga counterpart. Evading censorship is one thing, but downplaying the most important scene in the story does a lot to hamper Kaneki's character arc. The anime also switched the arcs of the emergence of the doves or the ghoul inspectors with that of gourmet or Tsukiyamas. This wasn't a huge change, but it was confusing to say the least, because the manga portrays the gourmet arc before the dove emergence arc, while the anime swaps them. While Kaneki breaking 103 of Ayato's bones to avenge Toka was a groundbreaking moment in the manga, considering the underlying themes of romance that was prevalent in Kaneki's dynamic with Toka, the anime decided to omit that scene altogether. For a character-driven story like Tokyo Ghoul, any alteration that changes how the audience views the emotional nature of the character tends to have a big effect in how the series is perceived. Another huge change the anime made was changing Hidei's fate. While the manga witnessed an implication of Kaneki Kaneki blacking out, becoming unstable, and probably killing Hide, the anime solidified Hide's death, which came to him from a fatal wound. But toning down Kaneki's metamorphosis was not even bad enough, because from the next season, Tokyo Ghoul stopped following the manga completely. They developed something called Tokyo Ghoul Route A, and although the story for this season was written by the original mangaka himself, it did not fly well with the fans. So much so that people mostly don't consider it to be canon. The important plot points were not changed, and the story of Route A only had smaller discrepancies, but small differences cause a ripple effect, which in turn creates large differences. As such, Tokyo Ghoul Route A became a story very different to what it was supposed to be. When Ishida released the manga chapters for Tokyo Ghoul RE, the anime had to adapt that as well. But RE was a sequel to the original manga, which meant that many of its plot points felt out of place after Route A, since the latter had diverged from manga canon. The manga for Tokyo Ghoul RE began with the environment that anime-only fans were completely unaware of. As such, when it was adapted for the anime's 3rd and 4th season, viewers were lost, considering nothing made sense to them. Character backstories were missing, and so were details related to the Quinx Squad. The anime also had not adapted Kaneki's fight with an inspector known as Arima, which was a key point that affected Kaneki's actions towards the end of the Tokyo Ghoul manga that eventually led to RE. Route A witnessed Kaneki leave his friends to join Aogiri and become more powerful. This angered fans to a great extent because it destroyed Kaneki's character arc, who literally killed a key member of the Aogiri following his torture to save his friends. He wanted to get stronger to protect the people he cared about. He did not want to get stronger just for the sake of it. Somehow, Route A managed to turn one of manga's best protagonists to an edgy emo boy. Aogiri and Arima, Kaneki's first life as a ghoul, and how it ended. So, before we talk about the events of Tokyo Ghoul RE, we should get into how the events of Tokyo Ghoul ended. Of course, Kaneki spent a considerable amount of time during the Aogiri arc hearing about how Dr. Kano experimented on him, implanting Rize's Kakuho into his body to cultivate her tremendous power. After he leaves the Aogiri hideout, he allegedly finds Madame A, who he had met during the gourmet arc at the Ghoul restaurant, and interrogates her to learn about Kano's whereabouts. He also kills over 50 members from the restaurant. During this time, he is intercepted by Kurona and Nasiro Yasuhisa, who, like Kaneki, have the same Kagune as Rize, proving that they are products of Kano's experiments. The two ghouls also happen to be one-eyed. However, Madame A escapes, and Kaneki proceeds to learn more about Rize's life from before she came to the 20th Ward. Around this time, he meets Matasaka Kamishiro, a ghoul from Rize's family who went by the name Shachi and was the leader of the 6th Ward ghouls. At the bar called Helter Skelter, Kaneki comes across Nico, who tells him about the OneEyed King leading militant ghouls from the 24th Ward within the Aogiri organization. However, he is yet to learn the true objective of Aogiri Tree and the reasons behind Kano's experiments. Meanwhile, incidents caused by a ghoul in a rabbit mask were increasing by the day, bringing Toka under the radar. From the nurse at the hospital, Kaneki finds out that Kano was apparently at a research meeting in Germany. However, he knows that there is a lie involved here, so he tries to interrogate the nurse, only for the Aogiri Tree and Shachi to interrupt. The situation leads to a fight between Kaneki and Shachi, with Shachi emerging victorious and leaving with the nurse. With their best option gone, Kaneki and his group ambushes Madame A, and she leads them to Kano's alleged mansion, where he should be hiding. Here, they find a strange wall, or the RC cell wall, made using detached Kagune. This wall is the gateway to the 24th Ward, where Kaneki and his group find several of Kano's failed experiments. Soon, they come across the Yasuhiro twins, and Kaneki evades them to save time by avoiding confrontation. Unfortunately, he comes across Shachi, and the two of them fight once more. Kaneki tries to cannibalize on his Kagune, but is pummeled to the floor by his opponent. Not long after, he sees Dr. Kano standing above them at the Kakuho farm chamber. Inside the chamber is Rize. It is revealed that Dr. Kano wants to free mankind, which is impossible in a world where humans and ghouls coexist. Since ghouls are born ghouls and cannot turn humans into ghouls by biting them like vampires and zombies, Kano used Rize to turn human beings into ghouls. The plan is flawed, however, because without humans, ghouls will not have access to the one thing that they eat. The situation angers Kaneki, who blames Kano for turning his life into a living hell. However, Kano tries to get Kaneki on his side, as he tells him about a ghoul named Yoshimura, who founded the Aogiri Tree to help with Kano's Kano's case. However, Yomo soon appears and grabs Rize while asking Kaneki to follow his own path. Meanwhile, the ghoul investigators close in on Kano's mansion while his failed experiments attack Kaneki. Shachi tries to subdue Kaneki while the latter increases his strength by cannibalizing on the failed experiments. The act of cannibalization transforms a ghoul's Kagune, giving rise to the Kakuja. The Kakuja clads the ghoul's body as an increase of RC cells within the ghoul body help upgrade the Kagune. With Kaneki cannibalizing, he develops a half Kakuja that resembles a centipede. The CCG breaks in and witnesses a transformed Kaneki. Inspector Shinohara and Kaneki then fight one another, and Kaneki wins the fight in a mindless rage. Amon enters the room and witnesses Kaneki's actions, who seems to be feeding on Shinohara. Amon attacks Kaneki with his Quinke, but the latter blocks it with his Kagune. The inspectors realize how dangerous Kaneki is, categorizing him as an SS-rated ghoul. Soon, Juzo enters the fight, and with Amon, they bring Kaneki to his knees. However, Kaneki claims to not want to eat anymore, and he runs away. While in his mindless state, he stabs his group member Banjo in the abdomen, which he profusely apologizes for after coming to his senses. Of course, being a ghoul, Banjo's wound heals, and he forgives Kaneki. The entire fiasco comes to an end, and things cool down for a while. Kaneki is depressed and keeps to himself in his room. However, he is alerted of Sen Takatsuki's book signing event by Hinami, and together, the two of them meet the author. Kaneki's dedication to literature and the author's works impresses her, and Kaneki's mood gets better following the book signing event. After some time, he goes to Yuta's mask studio and learns about Yoshimura saving Yomo after the latter was about to lose his life in a fight against the terrifying ghoul inspector Arima. Kaneki then heads out to meet Yomo, hoping to see Rize, but when he tries to talk to her, he is disappointed by her behavior because she seems to be in a maniacal state, primarily because Yomo feeds her enough to keep her alive, but not enough for her to regain her beastly strength. Things get worse when Kaneki finds out that the one-eyed owl leading Aogiri tree is Yoshimura's own daughter, and although Kaneki is disappointed, Yoshimura helps that the half-ghoul can one day save his daughter, since he is one of the very few ghouls who understands the world of humans as well as the world of ghouls. After a meeting with Toka, Kaneki decides to return to Anteku, while the CCG's bureau director Yoshitoki Washu decides to start the owl suppression operation to bring down Anteku's owl, the pacifist Yoshimura. The thing is, Yoshimura posed as the one-eyed owl to cover for his daughter's terrible actions, which means that the CCG is targeting the wrong ghoul. Kaneki finds out about the CCG wanting to raid Anteku, so he rushes to the coffee shop to help Yoshimura, only to be interrupted by Amon. Kaneki breaks Amon's Quinke, but he soon inflicts an impactful blow on Kaneki with his new upgraded Quinke. As a result, Kaneki activates his Kakuja, and the two of them fight once more. Kaneki loses a chunk of flesh from his waist, while Amon loses his left arm. Once again, Kaneki escapes while the incomplete Kakuja begins to take over his mind. Things get worse when he comes across Hide while escaping from the sewers, because Hide was working with the CCG. Kaneki tells himself that seeing Hide is an illusion, while Hide confesses to knowing about Kaneki's condition and that he wants to help his best friend. He also tells Kaneki how the CCG has surrounded the place, which means that Kaneki has to go all out once more to escape. Soon Kaneki comes across the infamous Kisho Arima, who slays ghouls as easily as he breathes. As the two of them fight, Kaneki proves to be no match for Arima. His Kakugen eye gets stabbed, and the madness makes Kaneki activate 8 claws of his Kagune. He tries to take Arima out with a lethal hit, only for the hit to be blocked. Arima is impressed by Kaneki's ability to damage his Quinke, but the fight ends with the former piercing Kaneki's body with his Quinke, raising him up from the ground, and then stabbing that very Quinke into his head. Following the operation and Kaneki's defeat, the half-human, half-ghoul is taken to Cochlea as a prisoner. Clearly, Kaneki is now in a terrible mental state, picking at his eyes like he did when he acknowledged his ghoul self. He keeps refusing his food, crying relentlessly, and clawing at doors long enough for his fingernails to come out. He also suffers from amnesia as a result of the misery, while the staff expects him to die. However, Arima has other plans with Kaneki. Arima starts to bring Kaneki books, which helps improve his state of mind since Kaneki seems to love them. He's enrolled into a rehabilitation program, given a new name as Heisei Sasaki, and later turned into an investigator within the CCG. Later, he became an underling under Mado's daughter, Akira. Two sides of the same broken mind. Ken Kaneki's second life as Heisei Sasaki. Tokyo Ghoul RE kicks off with Kaneki's new life as Heisei Sasaki, who has black hair once again. As a result of his amnesia, he doesn't remember much about his past life, barring some fragments from his fractured mind. This situation continues to bother Sasaki, frustrating him enough to make him more similar to Ken Kaneki himself. The CCG creates a new squad called the Quinks Squad, which recruits one-eyed ghouls. However, instead of categorizing them as ghouls, the Quinks are classified as investigators with built-in quinquets in their bodies, considering how the quinquets of ghoul investigators are made from ghoul kagunes. Heisei Sasaki becomes the mentor of the Quinks Squad, and much like how Kaneki used to be, Sasaki continues to scold his squad members for mindlessly killing ghouls. When he was a human turned into a ghoul, he tried to prevent the ghouls from mindlessly killing humans. When he lives a human life while being a ghoul, he does the same thing in reverse, showing us how Sasaki is a reflection of Kaneki. Heisei does not have the best work life, since his squad members often do not follow his orders and act independently, which gets him into trouble with his superiors. From his co-workers, he learns about ghouls blending into society as humans while they work on the torso investigation. Due to his amnesia, Sasaki has forgotten everything he knew, which meant that he was learning about the ghoul world from scratch. However, Sasaki would often have reoccurring nightmares, wherein a young man would tell him about how he is weak and worthless. This man is Ken Kaneki, but Heisei Sasaki does not pay any heed to the dream. Of course, Sasaki is not nearly as capable in battle as Kaneki, which results in him encountering Kaneki in his subconscious once again, this time amidst a battle where the opponent was ridiculing Sasaki's skill set. While Kaneki had been tortured by Yamori, he had acquired Yamori's habit of cracking his fingers. While Sasaki did not remember the incident, he is shown cracking his fingers during the fight against the serpent. As he cracks the finger, Sasaki manifests his Kagune and Kakugan. He uses the Kagune to attack Serpent, and begins to ridicule him with menace. The change in demeanor shocks his team members. The Serpent is defeated, and revealed to be Nishio from Kaneki's university. He taunts Sasaki back, claiming that he will always be helpless. As he does this, he even addresses Sasaki as Kaneki, leading to Sasaki absent-mindedly referring to him as Nishio Senpai. After Nishio leaves, Sasaki is puzzled and starts to scream as a result of his confused state, proving that even without the memories of his past life, he continues to be a helpless, tormented individual. Soon, the Serpent investigation is called off, while investigator Hirako switches the target to Sasaki. Meanwhile, Akira shoots Sasaki with an RC suppressant bullet to make him unconscious. The CCG decides to treat Sasaki as a regular human, but if he loses control, they will not only treat him as a ghoul, but also exterminate him if necessary. A few days after the incident, Sasaki is summoned by Arima for a private conversation. Here, Sasaki tells Arima about the man in his nightmares, Kaneki, who seemingly wants to devour his body. He comes to the conclusion that he used to be Ken Kaneki, as Sasaki claims to have not much memory of the first 20 years of his life. But this is also why he considers Arima and Akira to be his parents, while the Quinks members are like his family. Later, Sasaki goes to a coffee shop called RE with his co-workers. He's delighted by the smell of the coffee, but cannot seem to understand why the waitress seems to be so shocked upon seeing him. As you can guess, the waitress is Toka Kirishima. Later, Sasaki continues to reminisce about the coffee shop experience during work. He goes on to order coffee from the place and tears up as he takes a sip of it. After the next work meeting, Sasaki goes to Cochlea and meets Donato Porpora, who asks him to seek his memories from the past. He goes back to RE once again and looks at the books on the shelf while Toka asks him what he does for a living. Later, during an undercover operation, Sasaki thinks of the actions he will take if his memories return. Because he considers the CCG to be his family, he doesn't want to desert the organization. However, he is soon spotted by Nico and Roma Hoito, the clown ghouls from the Aogiri tree arc. During the raid to take down the Nutcracker, Sasaki comes across an Aogiri member, Takazawa, who realizes who Sasaki truly is. While the latter brings out his Kagune, he notices how his opponent is a one-eyed ghoul, much like himself, although Sasaki thinks of himself as a Quinks and not a ghoul. The ghoul offers to share secrets as he almost subdues Sasaki, claiming how he is Kano's masterpiece. He then throws Sasaki into the air and, using his Kagune, impales him. Left with the choice to either die or disappear, Sasaki meets Kaneki in his dreams once again, where Kaneki begs Sasaki to say his own name. However, Sasaki refuses to do so, as he is afraid acknowledging Kaneki will make Sasaki disappear. Takazawa goes on to beat the living hell out of Sasaki, but it is not until he is addressed as Kaneki that Sasaki loses his mind once again. He denies the existence of Ken Kaneki and asserts his identity as Heisei Sasaki. Takizawa broadcasts his tortured screams as he uses the building's PA systems, clearly indulging his own psychotic stream of sadism. sadism. Due to the broadcast, however, Hinami appears at the nick of time, saving Sasaki before he can be devoured by Takizawa. Sasaki does not remember Hinami, but thinks how Kaneki must have been a great person for Hinami to fight for him. Meanwhile, his squad member begs him to not acknowledge Kaneki as she wants Sasaki to stay. However, Sasaki has to get stronger, even if it's at the cost of disappearing. He then cracks his fingers as he asks Kaneki for power, and his two personalities merge in his subconscious, resulting in Sasaki engaging Takizawa in a heated duel. While the two inflict injuries upon each other, Sasaki speaks with Kaneki in his subconscious. However, this Kaneki is his younger child self, who begs Sasaki not to erase him because he does not want to disappear. Hearing this, Sasaki realizes Kaneki is just as afraid as he is and vows to protect his former self. Later, after things have calmed down, Sasaki thinks about Ken, Kaneki, and Toka, wondering if Toka is on a date with someone. The next day, Uda sends Sasaki his old mask as a present, while Sen Takatsuki sends him the book The Hanged Man's MacGuffin. With the book being addressed to Ken Kaneki, Sasaki learns how to spell his own name. On a different occasion, Sasaki talks to Akira about the death of her father at the hands of a ghoul. However, he hesitates as a reflex, because his former self was close to Hinami, the death of whose mother ultimately resulted in Mado's death in the form of revenge. The situation leads to Sasaki having a flashback to the time when Toka and Kaneki fought Kiryu Mado. Sasaki soon heads to the restroom in a state of shock when the childlike Kaneki reappears, asking Sasaki to erase himself so that Kaneki can live. Meanwhile, Hinami is in prison following her involvement in saving Sasaki during the fight with Takizawa. He visits her with several books when Hinami refers to him as Big Brother. This of course bothers Sasaki, but he cannot help but grow attached to Hinami once again. He later visits Uda because he was confused about the mask he had received. Uda claims that he had sent it to a regular customer and must have accidentally sent it to the wrong address. Although he confirms that he had only sent the mask and not the book, Sasaki asks Uda for masks. He accidentally bumps into Tsukiyama and the two talk about Sen Takatsuki's writing. Although Sasaki is not as obsessed with the author as Kaneki, he cannot help but analyze the sorrow in her works like Kaneki used to. With the CCG Quinks squad, Sasaki plans to use masks and masquerade as ghouls to procure information that the CCG has no access to. However, the CCG flat out rejects this idea. The upcoming operation failure acts as a boon, as the CCG is left with no choice but to approve the plan as a result of popularity votes. Consequently, the Quinks then wear their masks, and Sasaki dons his trademark eye patch that he used to wear to hide his Kagune when he had just become a ghoul. However, the operation is not as successful from his end, although his team performs much better. This is mostly because ghouls run away on seeing the Eye Patch Ghoul, considering Kaneki's past as a cannibal. This leads to Sasaki researching the infamous Eye Patch Ghoul in Kotaro Amon's drafts. As he reads about the encounters, he becomes sure of the fact that this ghoul was definitely a part of his past identity as a ghoul. He tries to learn more about Amon, only to be met with the knowledge of his death during the classified owl suppression operation. Sasaki seeks out Tsukiyama later by waiting where he had met him before. As they meet once again, Sasaki asks him about Tsukiyama being a ghoul and whether he knew Uda or Kaneki or not. However, he asks Tsukiyama to not answer the questions, while the gourmet is amused to see Sasaki breaking down and in tears. He meets Tsukiyama once again during the Tsukiyama family extermination operation. Sasaki realizes that he was right about the man being a ghoul. The two engage in a duel where Sasaki almost kills Tsukiyama, while Kaneki's voice asks him to stop. Ultimately, Kane arrives and slices off his right arm. Kane tries to kill him by dropping him off a building when Sasaki has a vision of his sewer fight with Arima. He watches Arima threatening to kill him with his Quinke, which shocks Sasaki. As a result, he regains his senses and attacks Kane. However, the real owl, that is Yoshimura's daughter, appears to attack Sasaki. Kane, now safe, beats Sasaki mercilessly, while the latter meets Kaneki in his subconscious once again. Sasaki grabs Kaneki's throat and recalls old memories. Memories where he was abused by his mother. Memories of Kaneki actually wanting to die for the people who loved him. Memories of him actually feeling joy when he met Arima, because he hoped to finally die at the hands of the Ghoul Reaper. However, every time he survived and blamed himself for being incompetent at dying. Ultimately, Sasaki accepts his past and lets go of his newer alter ego. With Kaneki's strength and reclamation, Sasaki strikes back at Kane, Ito, and Tsukiyama. He defeats Tsukiyama and Kane with ease, which impresses Ito as she wonders whether Kaneki or Sasaki is stronger than Arima or not. The two one-eyed ghouls then battle one another with Ito's Kakuja out. However, Ito goes berserk during the fight, pushing Sasaki to the edge. This results in Sasaki unleashing his infamous Kagune. He drags out her body from the Kakuja, and she expresses her fondness for him by licking his left eye. However, Sasaki cuts her in half and allows her to fall from the building. He then devours part of Ito's Kakuja like he used to do when he was Kaneki. Before leaving though, he ensures that both Tsukiyama and Kane fall from the top of the building as well. The One-Eyed King who both destroys and saves the world. Kaneki goes from Black Reaper to Savior of the Ghouls. As the CCG conducts the Cochlea raid, Sasaki saves Hinami while being unhappy with his continued existence, just like his former self. He claimed to want to be a sacrificial pawn who would go out in style without a care for his own life. He is later torn apart by Arama, which results in a projection of Hide talking to Sasaki. With Arama ripping him apart, the stress turns Sasaki's hair white once again, like Kaneki's hair had become following the torture at the hands of Yamori. In this new life, Arama had become a father figure to Sasaki, which meant that they shared a deep love for one another. For Sasaki to fall at Arama's hands meant that it was a huge blow to his heart, which results in his hair turning white. He gets beaten by Juzo and Abara, leading him to his subconscious once again, where Sasaki's personality convenes with that of Kaneki's. They realize that both of them have one thing in common despite their differences, and this similarity is the need to save Toka. With Ito Yoshimura out of the picture and Ken Kaneki back in action, he beats Arama and takes on his secret mantle, becoming the One-Eyed King of the Ghouls. With the CCG wanting to eradicate the ghouls, Kaneki is more morose as he wants to protect the ghouls, but also not cause human beings to die as a consequence. He realizes fatality is ultimately a part of the vision he needs to see through in order to usher in an era where man and ghoul could live beside one another, and so Kaneki decides to do whatever it takes for him to protect those he loves. Later, Kaneki consumes the entire Ogai squad, as well as the nucleus in Furuda's body, which turns him into an ever-growing mass of flesh that consumes everything it comes across. This form is known as Kaneki's dragon form. In this form, he meets Rize in his mind once again, who blames Kaneki for all the deaths of humans and ghouls alike. In reality, Kaneki did not want to live for others nearly as much as he wanted to die. Rize also claims to hate him because she believes she would have never been reduced to the state she is in right now if she had never met him. After he is released from the dragon, Kaneki is disheartened to see the damage he has caused. Meanwhile, an egg-like structure is revealed as it bursts out of the dragon's Kakuja. Within the structure is Rize, with her hair white as snow. Kaneki fights off Furuda and reaches the core of the dragon's body. He fights off her Kagune and kills her with a strike, bringing her misery to an end. Ultimately, he realizes that everyone is a protagonist in their own story, and Kaneki's misery does not make him better or more important than others. Everyone has their struggles, and they deal with it by choosing the ones they love while allowing themselves to be chosen by them. In the end, Kaneki decides to do the same. Marvelous verdict. Throughout his story, Ken Kaneki appears as a tragic hero who tries to bridge the brutal worlds of the humans and the ghouls. As a result, the greatest thing throughout the story is not the action-packed sequences or the world building in Tokyo Ghoul, but the character arc of Kaneki. It begins with him blaming Rize, the world, and Dr. Kano for turning him into a ghoul. He realizes his frustration by blaming someone, but it isn't until the torture sequence in Yamori's hobby room that he creates Rize in his imagination, who blames him for being weak. And ultimately, Kaneki's tragic arc comes to an end after he realizes his emotions and acknowledges how everyone has their own battles. Life is full of uncertainties, it is full of evil and cruelty, but it is also full of love, as people often choose who choose them to live a fulfilling life, despite the cruelties of the world. In the end, Kaneki marries Toka in a ghoul ceremony, and has the second natural-born half-ghoul child of the world, his daughter, Ichika. Tokyo Ghoul ends on a happy note, with the focus being firmly on Kaneki looking forward instead of looking back, and that's what we think makes his journey brilliant. He fell into the abyss multiple times over, but he never truly forgot his real self, and when he finally reached it, he didn't let go. Kaneki's story is inspirational if nothing else, except the parts with the ghoul killing, the cannibalizing, and the breaking his brother-in-law's body literally in half and whatnot. With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think of Ken Kaneki? Did you enjoy this video? If yes, then don't forget to like and comment. Till then, thanks for watching, be safe out there, and have a marvelous day.